So, thank you for joining me this afternoon. We are going to be looking at the use of colons within writing. And to be honest, it's something that I don't usually see that often. And before we begin trying to use them within writing, we need to know what are we speaking about when we talk about colons. And what I am speaking about, I'm not speaking in the medical term, I am speaking in the punctuation term. And colons, they are a type of punctuation and they look like two full stops, one on top of the other, like that. Okay. And there are quite a few different uses for them. And we will take a quick look at each type of use and we will explain how they're used within that section. Okay, so the different types of uses then. We can use colons to introduce a list. They can be used to introduce quotes or quotations. They can be used to introduce extra information within sentences or to emphasize a statement. Now, there are a couple of other uses that we won't be covering today, but you need to be aware of. One of the main ones in terms of English that you will see colons is when you write a play script, you will have the name of the speaker on the left-hand side. You will then have colons to show that that person is speaking and what they say. So that is within a play script. We also use colons in maths. Okay, so it's not just an English symbol, we use them in maths as well. And we use them in maths for time. So you separate the hours from the minutes with colons. You also use it in ratio if you're talking about 1 part of white paint to 3 parts of yellow paint. You would use the colons to separate the parts for ratio. And the other reason that you may use them is in RE. If you are looking at biblical references, they use colons within references in the Bible. Okay, but we are only going to look at the 4 reasons on your screen. And we are going to begin with the introducing a list. And the reason that I'm beginning with this is because this is the reason that is often misused the most. And the reason that it is misused the most is because the part of the sentence that goes before the colon, it must be an independent clause. Okay. So I have 3 pets. That is an independent clause. It makes complete sense on its own. I have then listed my pets after the colon. So a dog, a mouse, and a goldfish. They are my 3 pets. Now, what I can do to check that this makes sense, and this is a independent clause, first of all, if I substitute my colons in this sense with either and these are, so I have 3 pets and these are a dog, a mouse, and a goldfish, that still makes sense. Or I can substitute it for which are. So I have 3 pets, which are a dog, a mouse, and a goldfish. So I can use that trick to check because this second version here, it doesn't make sense. Because if I say I have a dog, a mouse, a goldfish, it kind of sounds okay, but the punctuation is wrong because if I substitute my colons for and these are, if I say I have and these are a dog, a mouse, and a goldfish, you can see that bit at the beginning, I have, it isn't an independent clause. Okay. So, in that sense, you didn't need any punctuation there. So, you could just say, I have a dog, a mouse, and a goldfish. So with lists, you will need to decide, is the bit at the beginning of the list an independent clause? If it is, you will need the colons. If it isn't, often you won't need the punctuation before the list. And like I've just said, a way to check is if you substitute the colons with and these are or which are, you will be able to see if it makes sense. Okay, so those are the colons within a list. The next ones we are looking at are the colons to introduce quotations. And the way that we do this is when you are putting your quote there, the quote needs to be a complete sentence. So in the example at the bottom here, my quote, "Don't tell anyone about the treasure," that is a complete sentence. Okay. Now, when we use colons to introduce quotes, you don't tend to have a speaking or writing verb. And what I mean by that is if I had the pirate whispered, "Don't tell anyone about the treasure," I would punctuate that as direct speech rather than as a quote. So I wouldn't need the colons in there. And you would also use that for if you use verbs such as wrote, told, shouted, all of those verbs that indicate that someone is speaking it, you would punctuate it as direct speech if you have that verb there. Okay. And when you are punctuating the quote, after the colons, you will need to have the inverted commas. Okay, so make sure you've got your colons, then the inverted commas. And in British English, we tend to use two inverted commas. American English, they tend to use one inverted comma for the quote. Okay, so punctuate it just like you would do dialogue, but you don't need a comma or anything after the colons. You just have the inverted commas. So those are the quotations. The next part that we are going to look at, there are quite a few reasons for this next part. So when we are speaking about introducing extra information, there are several reasons for doing this. So it might be that you have a main clause at the beginning, and the bit after the colon is giving the effect of the first main clause. You might also have a first main clause, and the second main clause is the consequence of that first main clause. More often than not, it is that you are explaining the first main clause or you are giving more details to clarify that first main clause. And with this particular type of sentence structure, the bit before the colon is the main clause. It makes complete sense on its own. The part after the colon, it might be a main clause, but it could be just an individual word or an individual or a phrase after it. It doesn't have to be a main clause that comes after the colons. Okay, so let's have a look at some examples here. So I missed the bus and I didn't get up early enough. That is explaining why I missed the bus. Okay, so this one here, it is explaining why. Okay, so we are going to the shops later. I need to buy some new shoes. So the bit here, I need to buy some new shoes, that is explaining why I am going to the shops. Okay, and then the final one, he was a world-class athlete an Olympic gold medalist, the Olympic gold medalist, it is giving more detail about the athlete. So that one there, rather than explaining why, it is giving more detail about the athlete. Okay. So those are the colons for extra information. And the final use that we are going to look at today is when you have colons that emphasize a statement. And we use this because it can help us to emphasize either a word or a phrase, and it kind of separates it from the rest of the sentence. So in the first example here, the only thing that matters was this. That part here, the first bit that I've just read, that there is a main clause, okay? It makes sense on its own. Then you're emphasizing what mattered, and the bit that matters is his well-being, okay? So it's emphasizing what matters. Then the statement in the second sentence, there is one crucial factor to success, and we are emphasizing the crucial factor, determination. So that is adding emphasis to what that crucial factor is. And then the final one there, the first step towards a healthier lifestyle is simple. And then it emphasizes what the first step is, do more exercise. Okay, so I hope for those of you watching the recording that you have found it helpful to see how colons are being used. Thank you for watching. I hope that you will watch some of the other videos.